Hi, welcome back to the Flow Arts Institute Fire Safety Video Series. My name is Dr. Howard Chen, and I'm the Director of Safety at the Flow Arts Institute. This multi-part video deals with the training of fire safety personnel, who are those individuals who are tasked with keeping the audience, venue, and performer safe during a fire performance or fire practice. For clarification, you may have also heard or used other terms such as fire watch, fire safety, or just safety in reference to fire safety personnel. Now, although the terms are different, they all refer to the same job in a fire performance or a live fire practice. This instructional video is relevant to the training of all fire safety personnel as well as all fire performers. So let me give you the complete outline of where we're going. In general, like our multi-part video on the safety training of fire performers, we'll start our video on the safety training of fire safety personnel with financial, legal, and then ethical considerations that are common to all fire safety personnel. Next, we'll talk about the mindset of the fire safety personnel. Specifically, we'll discuss the duties and the priorities of the job and characteristics of effective fire safety personnel. Next, we'll discuss the tools and equipment specific to the job of fire safety personnel, including clothing and equipment and on-stage positioning. After that, we'll go over fire abatement theory, as well as the specifics of fire abatement using cloths such as duvetine, as well as the use of fire extinguishers. And finally, we'll discuss a few scenarios that you're likely to encounter, as well as some of the worst-case scenarios that we all worry about. So here's the disclaimer. Before we start, I want to remind you that fire performance and the fire arts are inherently dangerous. Despite what we've talked about and what we will talk about, all the safety knowledge and practices in the world will only reduce, but certainly not remove entirely, your risk of serious injury to person or property. In all likelihood, you, as fire safety personnel, like most fire safety personnel in the world, will get burned. And the old adage that applies quite literally here: if you don't want to get burned, you shouldn't be playing with fire. Now, all that being said, if you're still interested in keeping those who practice and perform with live fire safe, there are several important things to keep in mind. So, let's talk about financial and legal safety. Although generally not as risky as fire performance, performing the job of fire safety personnel also puts you at risk for litigation or being sued. Although at the time of this filming, there is no insurance coverage exclusively for fire safety personnel, I recommend that all fire safety personnel obtain fire performer insurance, which covers both bodily injury as well as property damage. And please see the end of this video for our website and references and web links. Well, all that being said, let's focus on the characteristics of an effective fire safety personnel. In reality, it's not a job that can be done by anyone, and it's a job whose skill set may be entirely different than the performers that you're assisting. So there are many characteristics of an effective fire safety personnel, including communication, vigilance, audacity, but not fearlessness, and remaining calm and rational. Let's take a look at each one of these characteristics one at a time. First, let's talk about communication. Ultimately, your success as a fire safety person relies on your ability to communicate both verbally and non-verbally. Pre-performance, it's important to communicate with the fire performers a multitude of information, including the setup and location of the fuel depot and the fuel spin-off area, the proper flow both on and off the stage, and the location of the fire safety personnel who are assigned to extinguishing fire performance props. Now, during the performance, it's important to communicate with the other fire safety personnel to effectively watch the audience, venue, and performer. So communication with the fire performers during the extinguishing portion is also essential, and especially to accomplish extinguishing in the safest and the most expedient way. So, next up on our list of qualities of an effective fire safety person is vigilance. It almost goes without saying, but fire can be very quick and a very destructive process. So remember, there is no mastery of fire. There is only management of fire. And despite all of your efforts, fire can quickly get out of control. As such, paying attention is essential at all times. Now, if you feel that you're unable to pay appropriate attention, it's really time to activate another fire safety person to do the job that you're currently doing. Again, as a reminder, in the position of a fire performer or a fire safety personnel, there is no room for mind-altering substances, whether they're legal or illegal. And I should also mention here that your vigilance should be reflected in appropriate body positioning, ready to leap into action if need be. Next on our list of essential qualities for fire safety persons is audacity. We all know that it takes a certain amount of guts to be a fire safety person. In some cases, your quick thinking and action make a significant difference between safety and injury or loss of property. It takes a certain amount of guts to advocate for safety in the face of adversity from various people, which may include the show manager or fire performers, telling you to stop worrying so much or safety third. In fire performances, my general rule is that the fire safety personnel, whether it's one person or the entire group of fire safety personnel, has final say on safety considerations affecting the performance. Now, it's also important to remember that there's no place in your repertoire for callousness or fearlessness about fire. It's more dangerous than you remember and can hurt or destroy anything quickly. So have a healthy fear and respect of fire. Your fear and respect will only improve the safety of you and the people and the structures whom you're charged with protecting. Finally, let's talk about the value of calm and rational thought. Especially during an emergency, it's easy to get caught up in the excitement of the moment. You get this overwhelming urge to do the first thing that pops into your mind, and whether or not it's the best thing to do for the person or the structure on fire is maybe questionable. Really, as a fire safety personnel, we've all been there and have all made mistakes that we regret when we look back on past events. Just remember, the fire safety personnel who's acting purely on adrenaline and instinct, or the hysterical fire safety personnel, may be just as ineffectual as the hysterical fire performer or even an untrained audience member. Now remember, the first thing you should do in an emergency is nothing. Take a breath. Give yourself a second to think about the right thing to do before you act. Gather your wits about you and then spring into action. By taking this short time to organize your thoughts, I think that you'll find yourself a much more effective fire safety person. Alright, so let's talk about priorities. Now, I've alluded to them before, but let's be clear about the priorities of the fire safety personnel. It can be summed up in a few words. In order of importance, your responsibility is to protect the audience, and then the venue, and then the performer, and then the performer's fire performance tools or props. To put it in an easy to remember acronym, try AVP and add the T there. Another acronym that I like just as well is SAVE, S-A-V-E, standing for self, audience, venue, and then the entertainer. Here we start with the self because it's vitally important that the fire safety personnel keep themselves safe during the performance of the entire job of the fire safety personnel. If you're not safe, you can't actually ensure the safety of anything or anyone else. Next, address the needs of the audience. It's tempting to consider extinguishing the fire as more important than saving the audience, but if you do, you're actually missing a major source of litigation. The fire isn't going to sue you or your troupe or your production company or the venue, but the audience will. So remember that the illusion of danger is exciting, but that real danger is terrifying. By attending to the audience first, you'll ensure their personal safety, which, other than your own safety, is most important. So, the venue should be addressed next, once you've assured the safety of yourself as well as the audience. Now be aware that there's an important decision point here. If the fire on the venue is small and you have the right extinguisher, it's appropriate to attempt to put the fire out. However, if the fire is beyond your means to extinguish, it's really time to activate the professional fire services of the fire department. Finally, the entertainer should be addressed at last, as they likely have the most training and experience in self-abatement of fire, and really in many instances, they can take care of themselves. So as a review, remember the acronyms AVPT or SAVE. Either one works, but use the one that you find easiest to remember. So now, let's switch over to talking a bit about protective clothing choices for fire safety personnel. As you can imagine, fire safety personnel's risk of personal contact with fire is at least as great as that of a fire performer. So if you watched our video on fabric and fire protection, or our fire performer safety training video, you already have a heads up, as the same considerations to the clothing of fire safety personnel applies. So as we talked about previously, fiber content should consist of natural fibers or the synthetic aramids, but certainly not the traditional synthetic fibers like nylon or polyester. In addition, clothing should fit snugly but not restrictively. And since the fire safety personnel doesn't generally need as much costuming as the fire performer, safe clothing becomes a much more accessible priority. As such, long sleeves, long pants, protective footwear, fire-resistant gloves, eye protection, and hair protection are all strongly recommended. Each fire safety personnel should have a dedicated fire retardant cloth of sufficient size to extinguish all of the expected fire props with them, as well as access to a fire extinguisher. So, let's talk about the main duties of the fire safety personnel. In terms of the fire safety personnel duties around the performance area, there are several duties and locations that are appropriate for the fire safety personnel. So depending on your specific conditions, one fire safety personnel may perform all the duties, or the services of multiple fire safety personnel may be necessary. So let's go over these duties, which include fuel depot monitor, stage front monitor, extinguishing monitor, and the roaming monitor. Fuel depot monitor. The fuel depot monitor monitors fueling and spin-off procedures for fire performers, assisting with these procedures as necessary. They make sure that the fuel is easily accessible, but that it's protected from accidental ignition when no one is fueling. Stage front monitor. The stage front monitor is stationed at the front of the stage, generally facing the fire performers. They monitor the venue, including the rear of the stage, and the audience in their peripheral vision, as well as the fire performers. Extinguishing monitor. The extinguishing monitor is stationed at stage left or stage right, monitoring the audience, the venue, and the fire performers. When a performer has finished their performance, the fire safety personnel extinguish the fire prop if necessary. Roaming monitor. There's also room for a roving monitor, whose duties are the same as previously discussed, which are SAVE or AVPT, unless otherwise assigned. Now these individuals serve as additional eyes and ears for determining fire risks and serve as additional hands as needed for urgent and emergent situations. Let's now talk about the secondary duties of the fire safety personnel. While the main duties of the fire safety personnel include SAVE or AVPT, it's also important to recognize that there are other duties that the fire safety personnel are recommended to perform. Now these duties include venue safety, crowd control, scene safety, and professional liaison. So let's touch on each of these duties briefly. So for the venue safety, prior to, during, and after the performance, it's vitally important that the fire safety personnel, in conjunction with the show or site manager, assess the safety of the venue at which they'll be practicing or performing. In general, the pre-show job of the fire safety personnel is to assess, prevent, and rectify unsafe performance and practice situations. Now, the questions to be asked may include: is there adequate ventilation to support the duration and fuel type of the scheduled fire performance? Where are the fire exits? Where are the additional fire extinguishers, and are they charged and up to date? What is the overwhelming fire contingency plan? And what is the troop and venue insurance policy like? Where is the safest location to place the fuel depot? Where is the most appropriate fuel spin-off location? What are the flammable obstacles that a fire performer may need to avoid? What's the condition of the footing? The height and condition of the ceiling? And what is the movement and flow of the fire performer like, from fuel dipping to spin-off to ignition to performance to extinguishing to leaving the stage? Crowd control. Although venue security personnel often perform crowd control duties, at smaller and informal venues, there may not be any designated security personnel. So as such, one of the additional duties of the fire safety personnel may be to prevent audience members from entering performance spaces. Remember that some audience members may be drawn and to try to interact with the fire performers or even the fire itself, creating a hazard for all involved. Scene safety. If an accident has happened, whether fire-related or otherwise, or if there's a change in their performance schedule, or if non-fire performers or non-fire safety personnel need to access the stage, an important job of the fire safety personnel is to extinguish all the fire props left on the stage, if possible. This important step improves the safety of those individuals, such as medical personnel, who need to access a victim. Finally, let's talk about being a professional liaison. Undoubtedly, if you act as a fire safety personnel for long enough, you'll be called on to interface with various governmental organizations, such as the law enforcement or fire professionals. In general, the lead fire safety personnel, in conjunction with the venue liaison and the fire performance troop leader, may need to meet with these governmental entities prior to, during, or after a fire performance. Alright, well, we're not quite done with the fire safety personnel safety training video, but now's a good time to take a break. We've covered quite a bit of information already, so give your brain a rest, take care of your body's needs, and start up again when you're ready. Thanks for watching this far, and I hope you'll come back for the next part of our series. For the Flow Arts Institute, I'm Dr. Howard Shen.